The skies above Vora 5 burned gold and silver as the last human starship lifted into the air. It was a massive ship, almost the size of a city. Bright lights glowed along its long metal frame. Engines hummed softly, pushing the ship higher and higher until it disappeared into the stars. Down below, inside the great council hall, loud cheers filled the air. Hundreds of council members from every corner of the galaxy clapped their hands, waved their flags, and smiled. The humans were gone. At last, the council was free of them. James Walker stood near the back of the hall. He did not clap. He did not smile. He only watched. He was the last human left on Vora 5. The others had offered him a place on the ship, but he had refused. He believed there was still work to do here. He listened as Counselor Drax Vorin stepped forward. Drax was tall and broad, with hard blue skin and sharp black eyes. His voice boomed through the hall as he spoke. Today marks a new beginning. Drax shouted. We stand stronger than ever before. The age of human interference is over. We will rise as one united council. The crowd roared again. James felt his hands clench into fists. He had heard Drax give this speech many times. Always the same words. Always the same pride. But James knew the truth. The council was not ready to stand alone. When the noise settled, James stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. Counselors, he said, before you celebrate, you must hear this. You are making a mistake. The crowd grew quiet. All eyes turned to him. Drax narrowed his eyes. Speak, human, but speak quickly. Your time here is almost over. James took a deep breath. He knew this would not be easy. The systems you depend on, James said, the power grids, the communication networks, the defense shields, much of it was designed by human hands. My team built them with knowledge we never fully shared. We warned you this day might come. Without human support, these systems will break down. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Murmurs spread through the room. Some council members shifted in their seats. A few glanced at each other with worried looks. But Drax only laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. You were trying to scare us, Drax said. Typical human fear tactics. We have studied your systems. We can handle them without you. Your people are gone. You should go with them. James shook his head. I stayed because I want to help. I stayed because I care about the future of this council. Please listen to me. We need to work together. You need human knowledge to keep everything running. Drax stepped down from the platform. He walked slowly toward James until they stood face to face. You are no longer part of this council, Drax said in a low voice. You are nothing but a shadow of the past. Leave this hall. Do not speak again unless spoken to. James stood firm, but deep down he felt something cold settle in his chest. He knew they would not listen. Not yet. Without another word, James turned and walked out of the council hall. The cheers rose behind him once more, louder than ever. He looked up at the night sky. The stars seemed further away than ever before. James knew something the council refused to see. Trouble was coming, and when it arrived, they would remember this day. They would remember the last goodbye. Days passed after the humans left Vora 5, then weeks. The council believed they had made the right choice. Meetings continued as usual. Trade agreements were signed. New security plans were announced. Drax Vorin stood proudly before the council every day, reminding them that they had taken the first step into a better future. But far from the bright halls of Vora 5, small problems had already begun to grow. It started on the outer colonies. Tiny settlements floating on the edge of known space began to report strange issues. Power grids blinked off and on without warning. Long-range signals dropped for hours at a time. Cargo ships complained that their navigation systems kept failing in deep space. Some ships returned late. Some didn't return at all. James Walker heard all the reports. He had access to the council's lower systems. Nobody had bothered to remove his clearance yet. He read every message, every warning, and every complaint. He stood alone in the dark control room, staring at the data streaming across the screens. It was exactly as he had feared. The systems were failing slowly but surely. James knew he couldn't stay silent. He walked straight to the council hall the next morning. The large metal doors opened with a soft hiss. Inside, the council was already in session. Drax stood at the center, giving another speech about the Council's strength and progress. James didn't wait to be called. He stepped forward, raising his voice over the room. "Counselors, we have a problem." The room fell silent again. All eyes turned to him once more. Drax's face tightened. His jaw clenched. "You were not given permission to speak," Drax growled. James ignored him. He turned to face the other council members. "Listen to me," James said. "I have seen the reports. Systems on the outer colonies are failing. Ships are disappearing. Communication is breaking down. These are the early signs of a major collapse." A few counselors shifted uncomfortably. One, a pale green Archon woman named Mira Sol, raised her hand. She was one of the few who had shown kindness to James before. "Is this true?" Mira asked softly. James nodded. "Yes, and it will get worse if we do nothing." Drax raised his hand to silence Mira. His voice filled the hall again. "Enough of this fear-mongering." Drax snapped. "We expected small adjustments. We knew there would be small problems to fix. We can handle them ourselves. We don't need a human to tell us what to do." James felt anger rise in his chest. He took another step forward. "You don't understand," James said. "These systems were never fully transferred to your control. My team warned you about this years ago. Without the right knowledge, you won't be able to fix them in time." Drax pointed a sharp finger toward the exit. "You are no longer part of this council," Drax shouted. "You have no right to stand here. Leave. Now." James looked around the room one last time. Some counselors looked away. Some seemed unsure, but none of them spoke up. Without another word, James turned and left the hall again. This time, he felt a deep sense of dread settling in his heart. Later that day, more reports came in. A merchant fleet had gone silent near the Void Sector. No ships had returned. No messages had been received. James knew what it meant. The cracks were growing larger, and no one was listening. He stood at the window of his small quarters that night, looking up at the stars again. Somewhere out there, the human fleet was traveling far beyond the Council's reach. Part of him wished he had gone with them, but he knew he couldn't leave. Not yet. He couldn't abandon the Council to this slow disaster. Not when he could still do something to stop it. Even if they refused to listen now, he knew they would soon have no choice. 2 more weeks passed. James Walker barely slept. He worked alone, tracking every report coming in from the outer colonies. He saw the same patterns repeating. Power failures, missing ships, broken communications. Colony leaders sent urgent messages to the Council. Their messages all said the same thing: "We are losing control." But the Council said nothing in public. Drax Vorin made sure of that. Every day, Drax stood in the Council Hall, telling everyone that the problems were small. He promised that the engineers were fixing everything. He claimed there was nothing to fear. He told the members to stay calm, to stay united. But James knew the truth. The storm was coming faster than anyone expected. One night, James received a private report that made his blood run cold. It came from Captain Reen, a trusted transport pilot who had worked with James during his years as chief systems engineer. The message was short, but the meaning was clear. Multiple enemy ships seen near Delta 7, moving toward Council space. Weapons ready. We're falling back. Urgent assistance needed. James didn't wait. He ran to the Council security room. The guards tried to stop him, but he showed his old clearance badge. They let him pass, unsure what to do. James entered the room, breathing hard. On the large screen, the Council's outer defense map showed red warning lights flashing. Enemy ships were moving fast. Too fast. James turned and ran straight to the Council Hall. He didn't wait for permission this time. He pushed open the doors and marched toward the center. "Enough!" James shouted. "You have to listen now." The Council members turned, surprised by his sudden entrance. Drax stood on the platform, his face dark with anger. "I told you not to return here." Drax growled. James raised his voice, louder than before. "Enemy fleets are on the move. They are heading toward Council space. Our defense systems are failing. Colonies are losing power. Communication is down. You have to act now." Drax stepped down again, walking toward James with slow, heavy steps. His voice dropped low, cold as ice. "You are lying to spread fear," Drax hissed. "There are no enemy fleets. We have full control." James clenched his fists. His voice shook, not with fear, but with frustration. Look at the defense map. Look at the reports. We are on the edge of collapse, and you refuse to see it. Mira's soul stood up again. Is there proof? She asked. James turned to her, thankful that at least someone was willing to ask. Yes, I have real-time reports from Captain Reen. The outer colonies are already sending distress calls. The enemy is closer than you think. But before Mira could say more, Drax raised his hand to silence her. You will not spread panic in this council, Drax snapped. Guards, remove him. 2 guards entered the hall. They grabbed James by the arms. James struggled, but knew fighting them would do nothing. He looked back at the council one last time. You can ignore me, James shouted as the guards dragged him away. But you can't stop what's coming. The doors closed behind him with a loud thud. James stood in the empty hallway, breathing hard. He had failed to make them see the truth again. That night, the first full-scale attack began. Enemy fleets entered council space through the Delta 7 passage. Dozens of small colonies sent desperate distress calls. Shields failing, under attack. Need help, anyone? Please respond. James stood alone in the dark hallway outside the council hall, listening to the chaos unfold over the emergency channel on his wrist communicator. The storm had arrived, and the council had no idea how to stop it. The attacks spread like wildfire. One colony after another fell silent. In the dark hours of the night, James Walker stood at the edge of the landing decks, watching dozens of small ships rushing to prepare for evacuation. Panic had taken over Vora 5. Word had finally reached the people. The council could no longer hide the truth. Drax Vorin had lost control. James turned away from the window and rushed toward the emergency command center. The halls were crowded now. Council members, soldiers, and engineers all moved in every direction, shouting orders and questions. Nobody seemed to have answers. When James entered the command center, he saw the main battle map. Red lights filled the screen. The enemy fleets had split into several groups. Some moved toward outer trade stations. Others circled around toward inner council colonies. Every defense line had already failed. The council's best ships had either fallen back or gone missing. James felt his chest tighten. He had seen many bad situations in his life, but never anything like this. This was collapse. He spotted Mirasol standing at one of the control stations. She looked up and waved him over. James hurried to her side. Look at this, Mira whispered, pointing to the screen. They're targeting the power grid relay stations. If those fall, James finished her sentence for her. The entire council will go dark. Mira nodded, her face pale. We tried to boost the shields, but they failed. We don't know why. James took a deep breath. He knew why. The systems had been failing for weeks. Drax just didn't let anyone fix them in time. Now, it was too late for small repairs. James turned to Mira. Where is Drax? Mira pointed toward the council hall. He's still in there. Lock the doors. Won't speak to anyone. James clenched his jaw. Enough was enough. He pushed his way through the crowd and marched straight toward the council hall. The guard standing outside tried to stop him again, but this time James didn't slow down. He shoved past them and forced the heavy doors open. Inside, Drax stood alone, staring at the giant screen on the far wall. It showed the same red lights, the same spreading danger. James stepped inside and spoke, his voice firm. You have to face this, Drax. Right now. Drax didn't turn. His hands were clenched behind his back. You were right, Drax finally whispered. But I can't let the others see me fall. James stepped closer. Your pride doesn't matter anymore. The council is falling apart. We need to act together. Drax slowly turned to face James. His face was pale, his proud expression cracked. What would you have me do? Drax asked in a low voice. James took a breath. He had waited a long time to hear those words. Let me take control of system repairs, James said. Give me access to all the data. I need to send a message to the human fleet. We need their help. You can't stop this alone. Drax looked down at the floor for a long moment. James could see the weight of the failure pressing down on him. Finally, Drax nodded. James didn't wait. He turned and ran back toward the command center. He called for Mira and a small team of trusted engineers. Together, they began pulling data from every system they could reach. James sent urgent repair orders to the remaining power stations. But James knew that wouldn't be enough. The council needed more than repairs. They needed the humans. He opened a secure channel. He entered the old human fleet code. He didn't know if they would hear him. He didn't know if they would answer. But he had to try. James took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. "This is James Walker, last human on Vora 5. The council is falling. Systems are failing. Enemies are attacking. We cannot stop this alone. We need you. Please, we need your help." The message was sent. All James could do now was wait. James Walker waited in silence after sending the message. His heart pounded as he watched the transmission log on the screen. There was no answer. Not yet. Behind him, Mirasol stood with a small team of engineers, waiting for his next move. All around them, the command center was alive with shouting voices and flashing alarms. New reports came in every minute. More colonies lost. More ships missing. More people in danger. James knew time was running out. He turned to Mira. "Keep the system repairs running. Patch whatever you can. I'm going back to the council hall." Mira nodded. "Good luck, James." James walked back through the crowded halls. The faces he passed were no longer proud or sure. Fear had spread through the council like a wave. Leaders who once laughed at him now looked to the floor or avoided his eyes. No one stopped him this time. When James entered the council hall again, Drax Vorin was already standing at the center. But this time his shoulders were low. His voice was not loud. The council members were silent, waiting for someone to speak. James stepped forward. The doors closed behind him. Drax turned to face him. For a long moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. Finally, Drax spoke. "Did they answer?" he asked in a quiet voice. James shook his head. "Not yet, but they will. I know they will." Drax lowered his head. His pride was breaking right there in front of everyone. James took a step closer. "You have to stand down, Drax. You have to let me lead the recovery effort. You have to admit we can't do this without help." Drax's jaw tightened. His fists shook at his sides. For a moment, James thought he might refuse again. But then, Drax let out a long breath. He looked around the room. He saw the fear on every face. He saw the collapse he had caused. Drax raised his hand slowly. I was wrong," he said, his voice shaking. "I thought we were strong enough. I thought we didn't need them. But I see now. I was blind." The room stayed silent. Not a single voice challenged him this time. Drax turned to James. "Do what you must. The council is yours to lead, for now." James felt the weight of the moment hit him. He nodded. "Thank you." He turned back toward the command center and gathered Mira and the others. They moved fast. James gave them full access to the remaining system controls. They worked around the clock, restarting shields, boosting power grids, and locking down weak points in the council's network. Still, it wasn't enough. They needed more hands. They needed more ships. They needed human technology. And they needed it soon. Hours passed. James sent the message again and again. Then, at last, the answer came. A soft beep sounded on the console. A new message appeared on the screen. James leaned in and read the words carefully. Message received. Human fleet acknowledges council distress. Terms required for return. Full partnership, equal voice, no walls between species. Do you accept? James felt hope rise in his chest for the first time in weeks. But he knew he couldn't answer alone. He turned back to Drax and the other council members. "They will help," James said, "but only if we accept true partnership. No more walls. No more lies. No more pride." The council members looked at one another. Some nodded. Some lowered their heads. But none spoke against it. Finally, Drax stepped forward once more. His voice was heavy but clear. "We accept," Drax said. "Send the message. Bring them home." James smiled for the first time in a long while. He sent the reply. "We accept. Return to us. Let's rebuild together." The human fleet was coming back. And this time, the council was ready to welcome them as equals. Less than 24 hours after James sent the acceptance message, the sky above Vora 5 began to change. Hundreds of small, blinking lights appeared in the distance. They grew larger with every passing minute. The people of Vora 5 crowded the city balconies, the landing decks, and the control towers, watching the sky in silence. James stood on the high platform outside the council hall, staring upward. His heart raced as he counted the ships. One by one, they entered view. They were bigger, faster, and stronger than before. Ships built for war, but also for peace. Ships filled with people who had once called the council their home. The human fleet had returned. The largest ship, the Unity's Hope, slowly lowered itself toward the capital landing zone. Its engines hummed low but steady. It came to a perfect stop, hovering over the landing pads. The ship's doors opened, and a ramp extended to the ground. James walked forward as the first group of humans stepped out. Leading them was Admiral Ren Carter, a tall man with short gray hair and sharp, focused eyes. He wore a simple black uniform with the Earth symbol on his chest. Ren stopped a few steps away from James. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other. Then, James stepped forward and reached out his hand. "Welcome back," James said. Ren took his hand firmly and nodded. "It's good to be back. You called." "We answered." Behind Ren, hundreds of engineers, soldiers, and specialists followed. They began moving quickly across the landing zone, setting up equipment and connecting systems. Human tech teams rushed to the failing shield generators and power grids. Ships carried supplies and weapons to the outer colonies. Drax Vorin and the other council members came down from the hall to meet them. This time, there were no angry speeches, no proud words. Drax lowered his head slightly and spoke with a quiet voice. "Thank you for returning," Drax said. "We stand with you as partners." Ren looked around at the gathered council members. He nodded slowly. "Let's begin," Ren replied. Together, humans and aliens worked side by side. Broken systems were repaired. Power was restored to the dark colonies. The shields came back online, stronger than before. Council ships, now supported by human fleets, pushed back the enemy forces. Battles broke out in the outer systems. Enemy ships fell one after another under the combined firepower of the United Fleet. Where the Council had once struggled alone, now they stood strong together. James worked at the center of it all. He directed repair teams. He stood on the bridge of command ships. He spoke with colony leaders. Everywhere he went, he saw something he had feared was lost: hope. After days of hard work and long battles, the enemy fleets began to retreat. One by one, their ships jumped back into deep space. The threat was gone for now. On the final night, James stood once again on the high platform. Mira's soul stood beside him, watching the stars. "You did it," Mira whispered. "You brought them back." James shook his head. "We did it. All of us. Together." Below them, humans and council members walked side by side across the landing decks, sharing tools, stories, and plans for the future. The wall between them had finally fallen. But James knew the fight was not over. Rebuilding would take time. Trust would need to grow stronger. But at least they were no longer walking separate paths. At least they were united again. 1 week later, the council hall looked very different. The banners of every world in the United Galactic Council now hung side by side with the Earth flag. The hall was no longer a place of division and pride. It had become a place of new beginnings. James Walker stood near the back again, just as he had on the day the humans left. But this time he was not alone. Admiral Ren Carter stood beside him. Mira's soul stood on his other side. Engineers, soldiers, and leaders from both humans and alien worlds filled the seats. At the center of the hall stood Drax Vorin. He no longer wore his grand armor. He stood with nothing but a plain dark robe, showing respect and humility. He looked around the room with a different face now, less proud, more honest. He raised his hand to speak. The hall fell silent. "Today," Drax began, "we end the mistakes of the past. We have seen what happens when pride blinds us. We have seen the cost of pushing others away. But we have also seen what can happen when we stand together." He turned to James. James Walker stood alone when we would not listen. He warned us. He stayed when he could have left. Because of him, we are still standing. James felt a wave of emotion rise in his chest. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. He lowered his head slightly, but Rin placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Drax continued, "The humans have returned. Not as servants, not as outsiders, but as partners. From this day forward, Humans will have a full and equal voice in this council. The council members stood and clapped, not out of empty duty, but out of respect. Drax turned toward James once more. Will you accept this place among us, James Walker? James stepped forward. He looked at Drax, at Mira, at Run, and then at the gathered leaders. I accept, James said. But this is just the beginning. We have work to do. We must rebuild what was broken, not just the systems, but the trust between us. We must stand as one, or fall apart again. The room stood quiet for a moment. Then, one by one, the council members nodded. They knew he was right. Later that day, James walked through the city with Run and Mira. The streets of Vora 5 were alive again. Humans and aliens worked side by side. Engineers fixed power lines. Pilots trained together. Children from different worlds played in the parks, laughing without fear. Drax approached James in the quiet of the evening. He stood for a long time without speaking. Finally, Drax lowered his head. I was wrong, Drax said in a quiet voice. I nearly destroyed everything. James looked at him, seeing a man who had finally let go of his pride. You still have a chance to make it right, James replied. We all do. Drax nodded slowly. He turned and walked away, leaving James to look up at the stars one last time. The future was not certain. New threats would come. Mistakes would be made again. But this time, they would face it together. James smiled softly. The wall was gone. The partnership had begun. The council was united again.